Inmates dealing with extreme heat, mold, and mice in cells. It's another story about, do you have any rights, basic human rights when you're locked up? Some don't believe you do. 2 years ago, MSNBC's Ari Lieber described the conditions of this prison. Ari Melber, listen.
Down in Mississippi, Republicans run one of the most notorious, dangerous, and discriminatory prisons in the world. 10 inmates have been killed there, 12 dying by suicide in just the last 2 years alone. Prisoners live in conditions that violate human rights, completely out of control violence, abuse of solitary confinement for months at a time, which is a type of torture. And if any of this sounds familiar, it's the same prison that old school Jim Crow politicians were using to terrorize the Freedom Riders. Remember them? Who were advocating just basic racial equality all the way back in 1961. They held Stokely Carmichael there. Advocates have protested this prison for a long time. This Garland Justice Department actually found human rights abuse through an April investigation that puts formal legal pressure on the prison to change fast or be taken to court. The DOJ detailing savage conditions, torture, abuse, the deprivation of medical care to inmates who were found beaten or stabbed, as well as lethal and illegal temperatures of units that were reaching 140 degrees temperature.
So I said, Mississippi, you might be thinking, is this Guantanamo Bay, where there was much talk about we got to shut this down, torture?
With millions watching and many people benefiting from this program called Indisputable, we just need 1% of the viewers to become a paid member so we can continue to bring this content to you. Now back to the show.
Mississippi, let's give you more. Inside the Soul unit without air conditioning at Mississippi's largest prison, inmates hang wet sheets from their cell ceilings to dampen the air, lay drenched towels strategically across their bodies. Temporary reprieve comes from scoops of ice handed out twice a day. As punishing heat spreads across the Deep South this summer, inmates in Unit 29 at Mississippi State Penitentiary in Parchman say they are sweltering inside cells where temperatures could easily climb into the triple digits. The issue drew the scrutiny of the U.S. Justice Department 4 years ago, but despite efforts to upgrade the only maximum security prison for men in the state, inmates say the situation has not improved. MSNBC with the reporting. According to inmates, it's hotter inside the cell. One inmate in his 30s said by phone recently, rather be outside on the pavement, no shade. At least you can get a breeze. The heat inside is just stationary. Another inmate in his 40s said the showers he's allowed to take about 10 times a month, equally unrelenting. They are too hot, he said. They will literally scald you. Before parts of Unit 29 were closed following a spate of inmate deaths and rioting in 2020, it held up to 1,500 prisoners, including death row inmates. Entire prison currently houses some 2,500 inmates. After the deaths and rioting, the Justice Department Civil Rights Division began investigating Parchman and 3 other prisons in Mississippi to determine whether inmates' constitutional rights were being violated. Investigation is ongoing. NBC News conducted phone interviews in recent weeks about this with a correctional officer, former chaplain, half dozen inmates. In Unit 29 indicate conditions remain unsanitary, potentially dangerous. The inmates and the correctional officer were granted anonymity because they feared retaliation. Who can blame them? The only thing they did was come in and paint over the mold and the mildew, said the inmate who complained about the showers. He has been in and out of Parchman over the last decade, including for the past 2 years. There were mold buildup in food trays. Again, we're talking about basic rights to just be able to live. You're already incarcerated, just live. A report released by the Justice Department in 2022 found constitutional violations at Parchman, including failing to provide adequate mental health treatment, protections against violence. It also contained recommendations for the prison, such as conducting and documenting cell inspections, initiating a staffing study, and providing mental health screenings for inmates. Mississippi began installing air conditioners in some units at Parchman, not all of them, including Unit 29, because funding ran out, said Department of Corrections Commissioner Burl Kane. He estimated in 2022 that it would cost $650,000 to install air conditioning at Parchman alone. For units without AC installed, temperature logs from Unit 29 indicated temperatures over 100 degrees every day during the time frame of reported complaints, the report stated. With the highest temperature recorded at the dangerously hot unit, 145.1 degrees. Neither the Mississippi Department of Corrections nor the Mississippi State Penitentiary Superintendent responded to requests for comment. It remained unclear how severe the temperatures inside Unit 29 have been this summer. The country's going through a heat wave, which will remind you right now. Cautionary notices being issued throughout newscasts. Don't go outside. And that's for healthy, even people of a certain age, not even including seniors. Stay indoors, stay cool, get your fluids. It's dangerous. Justice Department officials did not say whether the state is abiding by its recommendations. Why are they recommendations here? But indicated the investigation is ongoing. Department of Corrections said in July that it had no timetable for installing air conditioning in Unit 29, but that water, ice, industrial floor fans were being utilized. Mississippi Today reported. Inmates who spoke with NBC News said ice availability can be irregular. Water from their sinks has appeared discolored. Fans, ventilation are covered in filth. It's so thick with mold. Well, you can snap it. An inmate in his 30s said about the fans and ventilation. He said the extreme heat has led to tension among prisoners in Unit 29 and can be frightening for those like himself with asthma and breathing issues. On top of the stifling temperatures, the inmate and others described receiving their meals on trays with black mold, corroded ceilings, walls, and enduring mice, mosquitoes, and other insects year-round. Nicole Montagano, the founder of advocacy group Hope Dealers Prison Reform, said she regularly receives photos and videos showing the poor conditions inside Unit 29. Inmates often complain they are unable to access educational and treatment programs or are worried about their mental health and safety. She said she spoke with an inmate who survived a suicide attempt in January, told her he never considered taking his own life until he was housed at Unit 29. So I have several questions here. I don't know what's taking the Justice Department. They say they're still investigating. I could put on a hazmat suit under guard protection not provided by the prison, I assure you, and go in with cameras rolling and document everything that the Justice Department needs to know. So let's cut it here, okay? If these conditions were being held at the Justice Department or in the warden's office, I bet you it would be fixed immediately. Dina, is cost a reasonable defense here? Because Mississippi, the statement is that it would cost $650,000 to just add the AC in Unit 29 that has gone up to 145.1 degrees. Is that a defense here?
No. So basically what it is the prisoners have a constitutional right to not have cruel and unusual punishment. That applies to their sentence and then applies to how they are how they are housed, because that is their punishment. So if they, like here, this certainly sounds cruel punishment. And that's what they have a right for. I mean, you could have that argument that we're not going to feed them so much because of costs, right? Obviously, that would be like a cruel and unusual punishment. So that's what their rights are. And that's the responsibility of the government. Sure, if you want to have a system where you have laws and you take people's liberty away and they have to go to prison, you have to provide them with a place to be that doesn't have cruel and unusual punishment. And what you have described certainly sounds cruel and unusual, shocking. You're right. The Justice Department seems to be taking way too long. And, here's the situation. There's so many vulnerable communities in our country. And it is true that inmates are the ones that are overlooked, literally because we don't see them on a daily basis. And because they also don't have a voice, it's hard to get information. It's hard to have an advocate. So their rights, even if they are being treated like this, don't get attention. So kudos for you guys for even highlighting it. But the taxpayers in Mississippi, this is your money. This is how a human being is being treated, and a human being that you want to rehabilitate and go back to your society, right? And live among you. And how on earth is that going to happen if you treat somebody inhuman, so inhumane? Yeah.
Well, and it kind of piqued my interest because Mississippi and the prison system has a history of bribery, scandals in its past. And I don't know what's going on now, where you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts that go to certain people. In the past, we'd call them cronies, who are supposed to provide services, but they hoard and maybe give kickbacks, most of that money, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do to uphold the prison population in Mississippi. I'm not saying that's going on here. I am saying it is a fact, Dina. I'll give you the last word, that it's in Mississippi's history, and that just has my interest piqued.
Oh, as you say, for-profit prisons are corrupting our society. The lobbyists behind those groups are putting in judges who put in more prison time. And then on the back end, they're not using the money to humanely house the inmates. So it's absolutely a huge problem in this country.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And I think you made perhaps the strongest point here. Not everybody is staying behind bars for the rest of their life. If you want people to return to society with a reasonable chance to integrate, become better, good citizens, good neighbors, you might want to do a little bit better than this, maybe a lot better, 145.1 degrees.